So last week I promised you that I was going to, I didn't promise you, I suggested the idea that I was going to share with you as we begin this sermon series on the 7 deadly sins, that I would point out examples of how Michelle lived out each of those. Unfortunately, this morning I left my list at home along with the DVD for the children's time. So we'll have to go another way with our message this morning. Our topic this morning of the 7 deadly sins is envy, and I have chosen as an example of that a familiar story from Genesis. It is a portion of the story of Cain and Abel. It's found in the 4th chapter of Genesis, and we will begin with the 3rd verse. I invite you to listen for the word of God. Sometime later, Cain presented an offering to the Lord from the land's crops, while Abel presented his flock's oldest offspring with their fat. The Lord looked favorably on Abel and his sacrifice, but didn't look favorably on Cain and his sacrifice. Cain became very angry and looked resentful. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why do you look so resentful? If you do the right thing, won't you be accepted? But if you don't do the right thing, sin will be waiting at the door ready to strike. It will entice you, but you must rule over it." Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." When they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Here ends the reading. So certain stories in the Bible, and preachers love these pieces. They offer questions, unanswered questions that rear their head, and the reason preachers love them is that it gives them an opportunity to do something really creative with the text. In this case, in the Cain and Abel story, the question that always comes to mind for me is, what in the world was wrong with Cain's offering? Why was it that God favored Abel in that moment and the offering he did, but then disdained Cain's offering? You know, here starts the whole big problem of it. And I've discovered something in I don't have the 30 or 40 years that Cecil does, but I have 20 years of Bible study and people bringing these questions to me, and I've come to an answer. And the answer is that, isn't it frustrating the way the Bible doesn't tell us some of the stuff that we want to know? I mean, that would be a really interesting piece of the story to know, and the question begs itself. And you know what I'm going to do today? I'm not going to tell you because I don't know, because the Bible doesn't tell me. But when we look at those questions, they're still valuable. The fact that the Bible doesn't tell us this is helpful today as we talk about this topic of envy, because it puts us in the same mindset as Cain was in. Cain had no idea why his brother Abel had been lifted up, why his brother Abel's gifts had been honored, and his own gift had been demeaned. And so there was Cain stuck in that spot. And as the text said, he became angry. So this anger can be identified as part of the destructive force of envy. Of course, as I said, we're talking about the 7 deadly sins. And I was out on a bike ride yesterday. I was practicing them on the bike. And so I'm going to see if I can pop them all off real quick. We have envy, pride, gluttony, greed, sloth, and 2 others. Obviously, I don't engage in the other 2. Oh, lust, and, oh no. It's in the bulletin. It is. Oh, no, I thought I got anger. I didn't say anger? Oh, that was the one I couldn't get on the bike either. So anyway. So of course we have this list of 7 deadly sins. And we have a story about murder. So what's not in our list of 7 deadly sins? Murder. Murder isn't one of the 7 deadly sins. Which tells us a little bit and is helpful to understand when we say 7 deadly sins, we're not talking about 7 sins that are more egregious, more destructive than all the other sins. Surely murder is as egregious and destructive as any sin could possibly be. Those in the Christian tradition who developed this understanding of 7 deadly sins, they weren't trying to identify egregious sins. They were trying to identify the roots, the sources, the things that move our soul. You know, Cecil talked about being in the image of God, the thing that draws us and tempts us away from living in the image of God. And so these 7 deadly things, and envy in this moment pulled Cain away from being what God had created Cain to be and commit this heinous act. Now, last week, Michelle used a quote that I really loved that I think could fit in all of our sermons. She didn't let me see her text this week, so I don't know if she put it in hers or not, by Simone Weil, which says that all sin is an attempt to fill a void in our life. So how is envy an attempt to fill a void? I think the void that we're attempting to fill is the justice void. It's why is my life not like their life? Why are my gifts not appreciated like their gifts? Why am I not graced with the comfortable life that I am? Why am I forced to suffer in this way while they live in luxury? What is the difference between us? And it is looking at that and dwelling on that and letting that grow in you, which is the envy that drives us to destruction. So I was thinking of a particular example. In our world, if you can catch a ball in a mitt thrown at you at over 100 miles an hour as it bounces off the dirt, and then you can go out and have a conversation with an addled pitcher, calm him down, and tell him exactly what the right pitches are to the right person against the right batter, and be able to go up and stand at the plate and hit a ball relatively frequently, at least 1 every 4 times, and you can throw the ball like a rocket from home plate to second base. How will this, the kicker is, and do this all left-handed? We will give you tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to use those gifts. Now, if you have the gift of crafting young minds, of sparking a curiosity and a need and a desire for knowledge, we will give you tens of thousands of dollars. Is one gift better than the other? If we really talked about what's more valuable, a teacher or a baseball catcher, I don't think there's anybody in the room that would say a baseball catcher unless you happen to be a general manager of a baseball team. So we live in a world where we are invited to see injustice in our life, to see ourselves as somehow being cheated. And we can allow that to fall into an envy. And the envy, I was trying to think about, I love to kind of put them into tight little lists. So I was thinking, well, what are the destructive things that happen as we let that envy grow inside of us? One of those things is a form of self-loathing. That somehow I am less than that other person. That somehow I am less important, I'm less valuable, I'm less useful, I'm more disposable. And so we lose that care and sense of self. Another is that God has gifted us all in different ways. And as we fall into envy, as we try to make our life be somebody else's life, as we look at somebody else's life and say, that's the person who I want to be. Now, sometimes that can just be aspirational. But it can also mean that I don't apply the gift I've given, and I try to pursue things that aren't a part of my giftedness. So I move into a place that I don't have the gifts and graces to do, because I'm hoping that somehow my life will be like their life. The last one, and this is where Cain finally fell, was to say, I will tear down those who are above me. I will destroy those things. A little light way that this happened, now we're part of the Great Plains Annual Conference. For those of you who don't know all of this Methodist stuff, we're all connected. All the United Methodist churches in Kansas and Nebraska have come together, 3 conferences in one big conference. When we were just the Nebraska Annual Conference, we were pretty small, as annual conferences go, and all of us pastors knew each other. I was kind of surprised. Russ introduced himself when he came up to me. I knew Russ because we've been together in this for a long time. We haven't spent time together, but we all knew each other. And I remember times when I'd sit with my clergy friends, my pastor friends, and I'd say, I really appreciate how so-and-so does this. I've always been impressed with who they are. And in this small family of pastors, invariably somebody in that group would say, oh yeah, but I know such and such story about so-and-so and this and that. And it was this need, whenever we tried to lift up somebody who was in the same world in which we were, this envious need to knock them back down, to make sure that they aren't better than me. They aren't more gifted at this vocation that we're all in than me. And that's that destructive force that can build within us, this desire to tear down because, for whatever reasons, for reasons we can't understand, reasons that are unjust, that I'm not getting the gifts, the opportunities that I'm due. As I looked at this list of 3 things, I realized something. If you talk about self-loathing, what we're losing is, what we're giving up is love of ourself. If we talk about not using our gifts that God has given us, then we are violating, we are slipping away from our love of God, who has given these gifts for a purpose. And when we try to tear one another down, when we try to destroy those with whom we are envious of, we are not loving the other. We are not loving our neighbor. When we put those 3 things together, what do we have? We have a violation of the great commandment. Love God. Love others as you love yourself. Envy has the power to destroy all 3 of those things. So very quickly, how do we pull ourselves out of this? As in most things, it's about keeping our focus on God, keeping the main thing the main thing. Yes, the world may, in many ways, value a baseball catcher more than a teacher. There's lots of gifts that in the world that you'll be lifted up for. As Paul did, if you can stand up in front of a congregation and sing, I'm sure some of you, and I hope you do, will come and tell him what a great job he did. But some people went out and mowed the lawn. Some people fixed things around the church. Some people did little things. Those are gifted things that helped in our ministry. Our gifts are not the same. In real life or in the eyes of God, we are not equally gifted. But though we are not equally valued in the world, in God's eyes, in God's understanding of creation, in God's deep understanding of us, we are all equally valued. Amen.